Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Chris Bachler, and I lead our product marketing team here at Density. And I'm being joined by my colleague, Emre. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, great to see you all and a bunch of familiar faces on this with us. I'm Emre, I'm on our product team here, so working on product and product design.
Awesome. And you all have already introduced yourselves, so I appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we can dive into utilization, and we're going to walk through, before we get into heat maps and specific data points, I want to give a little bit of context that'll help us kind of set the stage of what we're trying to achieve with utilization and what we're seeing a lot of our customers do with utilization data. So to set the stage here, kind of looking at how things were before pre-pandemic and how things are going forward. Obviously, before the pandemic, the office use was much more predictable. Most people were coming into the office 5 days a week, and everybody had a desk. But decisions were made based off of subjective interpretation. And we didn't really have good utilization about how our spaces were being used. And there was kind of the standard metric that everybody would get 150 square feet assigned to them. Going forward, what we're seeing companies really want to do, based off of now that everyone's working in more of a hybrid capacity and office use is going to be much more flexible, there's much more unassigned seating. They really want to use data to validate their decisions and their hypotheses about how people are going to use the workplace. And they also want to set baselines about utilization and benchmarks to strive for. And as far as sizing goes, of how much square feet we need, we really want to be looking at the usage before we make those kinds of calls of how much square feet we need to allocate. So a little bit more specifically of like using utilization data and the use cases here. I want to just call these three out. So we refer to one of our use cases as workplace performance. And this is all about creating the right mix of space types. And this is understanding the demand of certain spaces so that ultimately you can create the right supply of those spaces. And my colleague earlier today referred to this as the Goldilocks ratio. Similarly, we want to right size our neighborhoods, our desk ratios, and our meeting spaces. So being able to understand how many people are using a given space and comparing it to how big that space was designed for. So if a conference room is designed for 15 people, is it being used by 2 or 4 people the majority of the time? And if so, maybe we can do something and repurpose that space to be more accommodating to smaller groups. And then also, you can improve every space with the right types of furniture, equipment, and technology based on A/B tests. So we see a lot of people who are looking to see to A/B test if changes that they make to these spaces are actually making a difference in the utilization. So really a good way to do this before you go ahead and decide to roll out, do furniture or equipment or technology across your portfolio is to start small, test it, and see if actual utilization is increasing of those spaces. Our other use case, which we refer to as portfolio performance, is all about right sizing your portfolio. So by understanding the occupancy of different spaces, whether that be your floor or your building, you can start to assess if your existing space can accommodate additional employees, especially if you're planning on growing in headcount. You can also identify underutilized space and then proactively repurpose, consolidate certain spaces or sublease spaces. And then also you want to start to think about how you can forecast how much space you need going forward and when you're going to need that space. So that's what we're seeing most companies wanting to do with utilization data. So if you're new to Density, let me just give you a quick overview. I know that we have some folks here who are not new to Density, so I won't make this too long. But we are a workplace utilization platform. So we sell a combination of sensors and software. And we were started in 2014. We're a vertically integrated company, meaning that we manufacture our hardware and we develop our software and we provide support all in-house and all in the United States. So let me tell you a little bit about our technology here, and then we'll get into heat maps and the data insights that you can pull out. So our sensors are not cameras. One of the most important things to our customers is privacy. So our sensors are 100% anonymous. They're incapable of capturing personal identifiable information. The sensor on the left goes over doorways or entry points, and it counts how many people are coming in or leaving a space. The sensor on the right, it gets mounted throughout your ceilings or on your ceilings throughout your floor. So it'll cover your neighborhoods, your desks, open collaborative spaces, and it also goes inside of your conference rooms. Now, this sensor is going to tell you where people are going throughout the space, how much time they're spending in those spaces, and how many people are in each one of those spaces. Okay, so Emre, this is your cue here. We've got some heat maps popping up. I can leave this screen up, or if you want to pull up heat maps in the software itself, what would you prefer?
Yeah, I'll pull it up so we can actually dive into the product. Cool. So Chris kind of walked us through some of the use cases that we're helping our partners and customers tackle. I kind of want to show what that actually looks like in our product and speak to what's there today and also kind of what we're building or like the kind of focus on from a product perspective for the coming year. I always like to start actually showing our app. So this is our San Francisco office for density. And as we run through this, if you have questions, throw them in the Q&A. We'll kind of answer them throughout and save time at the end. But this is a floor plan from our SF office in San Francisco from a couple days earlier in February when we were doing a product offsite at our office and then in the San Francisco Bay Area. And this is kind of basically what our sensors are seeing throughout the space. So if I scroll through a given day, we can kind of see on the floor plan where people are spending time. And one of the questions we get a lot is like, people are starting to come back to the office, getting ready for kind of future of work and like, what do our new floor plans look like? And how are people voting with their feet? And the heat maps kind of visualization helps make that really clear. Like if we look at this period of 2 days at our office, a lot of time was spent in this primary conference room. People walked around the kind of our kitchen area for where snacks are, obviously super popular. And you can see like across the different desks where people are spending most of their time relative to other spaces on the floor plan. And so what's cool too about our sensors, like the point cloud from the open area sensor that Chris showed is so accurate that it can show you like where in a given room people are spending time. What's interesting about this room in particular is there's a whiteboard on the right side of this room, and you can kind of see people congregating near that whiteboard. So that's kind of our technology, what it looks like on our floor plan. I want to talk to a few use cases that we're directly focused on over the coming months and have been focused on for a while, and also interactions in our app that power those use cases. So the first one is on meeting rooms. This is a question we get a lot, is like, what is the right mix of kind of meeting spaces, or whether it's a conference room or collaboration space to have? And you can use density data to actually drive conclusions around that in your space. So if I zoom into this conference room, it has 8-person capacity, but we can see over this period of these 2 days that I've selected, so February 2nd and 3rd, where there was a bunch of people in our office, the majority of the time, the room was used by 1 to 2 people. And so we can really quickly see that this room is not being used how we intended it, which is like for large group meetings or large group kind of collaboration sessions. And if we roll this up across, a bunch of different conference rooms of similar sizes, whether it's in San Francisco or in the US or globally, you can start to understand performance relative to other similar types of spaces, and then translate that into adjustments you make across the portfolio, like in this case, likely reducing the size of this conference room to be smaller. You can also add labels to spaces, and one of the biggest points of feedback that we get from customers and just people we talk to every day who are on real estate teams across the world is like, data is only as valuable as the context that's around it. And this labeling primitive is one way to add context to spaces. So if I tag this space with the fact that it's Zoom enabled, or maybe it has, a rectangular table, when I understand conference room, I kind of roll up conference room utilization data, I can see like how are conference rooms with Zoom enabled, Zoom capability performing versus conference rooms without Zoom capabilities. And that is another indication of like adjustments you can make when optimizing your conference rooms. So that's one use case. Conference rooms comes up a lot. Another is kind of whether people are doing focused work or collaborating in different spaces. And we've heard this idea of like we versus me spaces. So I'll give you an example. This area at the bottom left of our office here, and I'll click out of that. The bottom left of our office here is designed for collaboration. There's a couch, there's 2 couches here and a chair and a coffee table. The idea is you can sit and have a meeting or coffee, and there's a view of kind of the Bay Bridge in San Francisco. What we're seeing from this data though is it's barely used on a day where we have a lot of traffic in the office. And so again, we can take advantage of labeling and say this is, you know, a certain type of couch. Maybe it has like a Herman Miller lounge chair. And but the actual utilization is really low. And so and not only is it low, it's not being used by multiple people when it is used. We can see that under group sizes here. And so what this tells us is like the space that was designed to be a collaboration space is being not used. And when it is used, it's being used more for focused work. And we can kind of take that input and then make changes to the space based on it. And then finally, desks. So one feedback or question we get is like, how do I make sure as a space planning team or a real estate workplace team that we're allocating the right number of desks to the right departments, and especially given employees have more choice than ever, that we're actually optimizing that properly. So what you can do in density is kind of select a group of desks. So I'll select all these spaces and I will make them desks, and I can start to label them. So in this case, we've labeled this as sales. Maybe it's our EMEA sales group that sits here. And what this does by labeling a group of desks, I'm effectively modeling a neighborhood. And I can tell by rolling this up what the utilization is in a neighborhood. And we can kind of take that and with our kind of customer success team and our team of kind of data scientists, turn that into recommendations around how, you know, the number of desks you should allocate for a given team in a given space. So I can see that this particular desk was used the most out of this whole neighborhood, or maybe these 2 desks, and both are tagged with EMEA sales. I have desks over here that are customer success, and no one is there on these 2 days. And so it's an example of a third use case tying to kind of neighborhoods and planning out what teams are assigned, how many desks in what spaces. So hopefully that kind of helps on kind of just the first floor. This is normally when we start working with a company, we'll start focused on one floor. And then as you kind of cover more and more of your real estate portfolio, we can roll up these insights across all of your different spaces. And so imagine trying to figure out like how are sales desks used in San Francisco versus sales desks in New York. And then you can make changes based off that data. But I find it helpful to just start grounded in a simple floor plan and talking about how do you navigate and understand how space is used, how do you label spaces, and then how do we benchmark performance of spaces relative to other similar or different spaces. So we'll kind of walk through, and I'll let Chris speak to these, but I can share my screen. Some of the kind of reports and insights that come out of the kind of interface that we just walked through and the behavior of labeling spaces.
Yeah, thanks, Emre. So what we're looking at here is really, excuse me, is really a recommendation of the recommended types, number of rooms. Let's say, I want to make sure I'm getting this correct. The number of rooms. This is actually the outcome, right? So this is after analyzing data from density and rolling it up and making sense of it. So the insight here is that 60% of your meetings are one-person meetings, right? So 95% of your meetings are for 4 people and less. So we can make the recommendation that you should increase the number of small and medium meeting rooms to enhance the workplace experience and ensure that employees have the ability the available meeting rooms that they need. So this is ultimately what the end answer that people want to get, right? Is what is the actual suggestion that we should do with our data? Emre, anything to chime in on that one?
No, I think, I mean, the meeting rooms one, it's like a super popular question, especially given like, as Chris showed this slide of like the workplace before and kind of after, and having more focus on spaces based on intent, like what are you doing in that space? And so making sure you have the right mix of space, especially rooms where people have meetings, is super important. One I'm personally really interested in is how do you identify the best performing open collaboration concepts for different regions or different teams? And Patrick, you had this question, which I think is a great one, of like, how do you start small and with data and evaluate, and then A/B test and apply it, given each site has its own culture. I think this ties directly to this idea also of like, how does open collaboration look like in different regions of the world, in different types of spaces? And our whole idea is like, the larger your data set gets, the more conviction you can have in applying those insights across the board. But even if you're starting small and looking at 3 spaces, you might find that the majority of the time in a given space that you designed for open collaboration is being used for heads down work. And we saw that in our kind of lounge seating area in our office that we just looked at in our heat map. And so this is an example of a report we can create of looking at 3 different spaces and seeing the breakdown of time spent collaborating versus time spent heads down. And then we can look at the labels or the attributes of space C, what region it was in, how is the space designed, what teams are working from there. And then you can use that to kind of drive investment, whether it's changes in spaces A and B, or using space C more often for similar offices across your portfolio. So I think, Patrick, it's kind of like the idea would be, you start small, test out in a floor, expand to a building, expand to over time to your whole portfolio. And every experiment you run can be grounded in like the region it is in, or the different types of spaces and the attributes that it's touching.
Yeah, and to jump on that too, Patrick, I think where I would start with this also would be to look and see if there are certain similarities between regions. Maybe there are certain teams who are using a conference room or a Zoom room technology in a certain way. And if you find, let's say it's a sales team, and you also want to see or test if the other sales team in a different region or similar size office is going to utilize it the same way, that's probably where I would start. I would try to find some commonalities between those different spaces, like teams and roles, and seeing if that's the correlation between utilization of the space or not. And then you can refine over time and see if there are differences. Okay. So this is a good one here. I think this is pretty interesting. I'm curious how many people have this happen to them on a regular basis as part of their job, where a department is growing in headcount and they're asking for additional desks or spaces, or maybe it's conference rooms or open collaborative spaces. In this instance, we're looking at desks specifically. And we're looking at 3 different neighborhoods that have been assigned to specific teams. So here we have a customer success team, an engineering team, and a product team. So we're looking at that top chart on the right. And this is over a 6-month period of time. And we're looking at how the desks were used in each one of those team neighborhoods. So let's say, for example, that the department head of the customer success team came to you and said, hey, Emre, I really need a lot more desks. I'm growing in headcount. I'm actually going to be hiring 100 people next year. So, we need some more desks and we need some more space. I think the question to ask yourself now is, how do you make those decisions today? What kind of insights do you have to actually know if you need to provide more desks to a certain department or not? With density, this is going to at least show you at the beginning what the utilization is of that customer success team. So it's that bottom chart there, and then we'd be able to tell that their desks are being only utilized below 10% on average. And it's not really a team that we need to allocate more desks to. Whereas if we look at maybe the product team or the engineering team, their utilization has been increasing over time. And if they're going to continue to grow in headcount, we need to consider adding more desks for them and potentially even assigning desks from the customer success team to those other departments if they are close in proximity to one another. And then Emre, if you want to touch on the actual recommendation of the ratios there.
Yeah, I mean, this is we partner with a lot of companies that tackle this problem. And Bala, I saw your question on which of these use cases have produced the most improvement. I think kind of the jury is out as we like kind of charge ahead in this future of work era of what produced the most improvement because of all like the variety and mix. So I don't know that we know the answer to that yet, but these three keep popping up in terms of questions that folks are trying to answer. But on desk headcount ratios, I mean, this is very much tied to if you have a department in a certain city. So let's say, in New York, and you have the CS team, what, not just desks, but how much space does that team actually need? And as we think about headcount growth, think about what different types of spaces are allocated to specific departments, and start to model what the ideal mix of space looks like for a given team in a given region, and especially like the number of desks that team would need. And we can even see this if you tag a bunch of different spaces like desks, neighborhoods, conference rooms, open collaboration areas with the departments that are in that space. We can see how long basically dwell time at desks versus dwell time in open collaboration areas. And that's kind of an added insight on top of like, maybe this team doesn't really need desks anymore because they're doing a lot of workshops together. So that's what the bottom side is intended to call out. And I think overall, as we think about our product and our roadmap, we're going from this world of like having just unlocking access to utilization data that's accurate, like much easier to get access to than other ways of getting that data, which are mostly anecdotal. Shifting from that to insights, which average utilization by neighborhood up top is an example of an insight. And in long term, we want to like productize this even in our software of going from insights to recommendations. So what changes can you make regardless of like the scope you're looking at, whether it's at your portfolio or you manage a given building or it's even just one floor? What are the changes we recommend on that space? And that'll only get better over time, the more space that we cover, and also the more context we pull into density, like headcount growth is an example here that's super critical to be able to actually recommend a change to the number of desks that customer success has. So that is kind of, Chris, I guess anything else to add on?
That was great. That's good.
Cool.
I think there was one more slide in there if you want to.
Oh yeah, we can go back.
Up.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so, looking at the types of spaces, one of the things that we touched on earlier was creating the right mix of space types. And depending, on how your business runs, you may not categorize spaces by neighborhoods and assign them to teams. But if you do, where you were assigning, let's say, conference rooms, desks, open collaborative spaces to a specific team, you could label them as such, and then understand how those spaces are being utilized within those neighborhoods. So I think what's interesting here, kind of going back to our earlier example of the customer success team, we can see clearly here if we follow the color of the CS team there. Forgive me, I'm colorblind, so I'm not even going to attempt to identify what that color is. But whatever that color is, Emre, if you could call it out, whatever the CS.
Yeah, it's like a teal color. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm red-green deficient. So anyway, that teal color, you can see the CS team uses conference rooms and open collaborative spaces the most, then lounges, and then at last are desks, right? So this gives us a really good indication of team by team or neighborhood by neighborhood utilization of the spaces that those neighborhoods are using. And that gives us some beginning conversations of the right types of spaces we need to create for them.
Yeah, I think this one's really interesting because I mean, so much of like measuring space ties to being able to improve it around actual like humans that are in the space. That's like our whole focus and what we're very passionate about. And so being able to see like how are different teams working in different spaces, or how do offices in different countries, maybe with the same team, might have different norms of how they use these spaces, and that's kind of measuring produces again these insights like what you're seeing here that you can then use to go make changes across the portfolio. So that's kind of an overview. I think we're in a week this week where we're kicking off our fiscal year and just talking about our roadmap, all the different partners and customers we have and the questions they're asking. And we wanted to share the 2 or 3 most top of mind questions that we're getting with the partners and customers that we work with, some of whom are on this webinar. So with that, would love to kind of open up to any questions. We'll definitely be sending this out as a recording afterwards. There's more webinars where we'll dive into different parts of our product and different questions. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to add them in chat or in the Q&A, and we'll try and answer the ones that come in live, and then obviously can follow up offline too. So David asks, is it easy to link with other software? So this is a big focus for the coming year for us, because we work with kind of Fortune 2000 customers that have data in a bunch of different systems. And so when we talk about labeling, we need to be able to, over time, like ingest, ideally, those labels from other software systems that may store spaces and attributes. And so we have kind of APIs for this, but I think this year you'll also see first-class integrations with other software systems that we'll announce, where it'll be so much easier to just keep the 2 in sync. But the way to do that currently is you can kind of, through our API, sync that information with density. But again, I think that's spot on with this idea of like, how do we make it much easier to pull in context around utilization data? So that's a good question. Yeah. So Tom asks, could you please elaborate on how you can televise sensors, whether it's heads down or collaboration work? So one of the data points we look at is this idea of group sizes. So for a given space that you can define, and spaces in density is defined by our end users. So you can kind of draw whether you want to measure a particular desk or a particular seat or an entire room. And we can tell like, what are the kind of group sizes, the number of people in that room, and how long did they work? How long was that room kind of at that, or that space at that group size? So for heads down or collaboration, you can see like how long was that room or space occupied by 1 person or 2 people, and then versus like 4 to 5 people that were in session in that particular space. And so that informs whether it's heads down space or collaboration. You can even draw multiple areas of interest on the same space. So you could look at a single desk, how long is someone working from there, or the entire neighborhood, like how many people are actually working out of that kind of bucket of desks. Patrick asks, are there APIs for heat maps to overlay on some other team's floor plan tool, like an IWMS system? So we don't have this for the actual like interface, the kind of the UI that you see, but it is built on top of our APIs that will be exposed to our customers as well. So you could, in theory, build it. It's hard to definitely like to kind of build that interface, but I think it's a great call out of how do we kind of expose this data and other tools that folks use. So it's definitely a great idea. All right, Chris, I'll kind of pass some of these over to you, so I'm not talking the whole time here. So Lisa asks, are there plans over the next 1 to 2 years to gather data from clients and share new normal benchmarking?
Yeah, absolutely, Lisa. I think that's one of the things that we're seeing our customers are really want is actual, what's everybody else doing, and what are kind of the standards for what we should be shooting for from a utilization perspective. So yeah, that's definitely something that we're trying to do in the short term here, where that data is actually inside of density, and you can see those insights pop up around specific conference rooms or sizes of spaces, and kind of how it should be performing relative to those industry standards. So yeah, that's definitely something that we're planning on doing.
What we found too, Lisa, is like people share that information anecdotally with each other. Like I think the kind of real estate workplace community is so small. There's a lot of opportunity to productize like how that gets shared. Like here is how we are building out, conference rooms in San Francisco as X company, and obviously in an opt-in way. It's a pretty fascinating area as we build this out. All right, Chris. So which countries or regions are density sensors available? Brazil, Mexico, France.
Ooh, we're going to have to pull up our list.
Yeah, so as Chris does that, I think we're in like over 30 countries. All our customers are global companies pretty much. And so we serve them in a bunch of different countries. If you message me or Chris afterwards on LinkedIn or through email, my email is emre@density.io. We can get you a more detailed list or kind of talk through the specific countries. But yeah, we're in 30 and counting.
32, I think, at the moment.
Awesome.
Yeah, we'll send that out to you too.
Cool. Zoe asks, do you install your own sensors or do you have a partner for installation?
Yeah, Zoe. So we do have a partner, a couple partners who are certified through us that we work really closely with. TRX is the name. But when you actually get set up with Density, we work with you with those partners and look at your floor and figure out how we should actually install the sensors. And so it's a really close partnership that we go through and process when we're getting you set up. And we look at your ceiling heights and where things should be mounted, if there's anything that's being blocked. So that way we want to make sure that we're covering the floor properly and being able to track utilization correctly. So definitely something that is built into our process.
Cool. And then maybe one last one from Christine. Can you use this to determine if restrooms or kitchen areas need to be expanded? Yeah, I mean, the ideal goal for us is like to be able to measure and improve any type of space. So it's not just restricted to the use cases we mentioned. Restrooms, kitchen areas, our use cases we'll probably get to more directly later in the year, but you can kind of instrument any space in your office with density sensors and you'll get data to be able to figure out how to improve it. Another thing I'll call out with kitchen areas and restrooms in particular is right now we're very focused on historical. So everything Chris and I have talked about so far is looking at, let's say, the last 90 days, the last 180 days, the last 30 days, and then drawing conclusions for how you can make adjustments to your space. But our sensors also have real-time capabilities, which we'll be building out kind of more experiences around on the latter half of this year. But you can imagine a lot of our customers come to us with questions around like, how can I share wait times for the kind of cafeteria, or how do I dispatch cleaning crews to restrooms? Like those are a bunch of different questions related to real-time data that we'll be able to solve for over time with the existing hardware that are in that you install for historical data. And so, yeah, restrooms and kitchen areas are two examples of that.
All right. Well done. Well, thanks everyone. We're gonna end it here. We appreciate y'all joining us. I know some of you are from sitting by a beach, so I'll let you get back to enjoying the sun out there. And Emre, thanks so much for doing this.
Of course. And thanks everyone. Excited to do more of these. Connect with us on LinkedIn. We're chris.bachler@density.io and emre@density.io if you have any questions as follow-ups after. So have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Take care.